come from and how comfortable you can use the traditional form. For example, a if you come from that culture, sometimes it's completely open to see a Caucasian or let's say non-native to perform your art form. Sometimes you feel very open because you appreciate that somebody else is appreciate your traditional form. But at the same time, some people might feel not comfortable. They would rather to have the people from the native culture to perform, to use the traditional form. And jump in anytime, please. And we also talk about tradition not equal to authenticity. It's basically come from where you truly are, your heart come from. I mean, what's the spirit? So even you perform traditional form, the form might be different, but if you perform the spirit of that traditional form, it's authentic. So we have some discussion about those two, and also we also share experience. If you are being in the Bay Area, so many artists have access to many different art forms. Some of us have really strong connection to specific culture, and can be identified as a part of, belong to, kind of identified, but they still don't feel comfortable to either perform or teach the art form, just basically because they are not come from the native land. But so there's a limitation, but they also can bring out the other art form. So they feel they have both access. They have both limitation and freedom to use the form to create their work. So we share the experience from we come from the native land, and also people who not born in that land but feel strong connection. We also have experience from a person have shared the same culture for native. So there's a line between limitation and freedom. It both exist at the same time. So we cannot draw any agreement or conclusion about that.
Through the 3 sessions that we had at the table, I felt that there was a kind of an underlying thread, a tension between one's love of a cultural form or a traditional form, whether or not you are from that particular tradition or community, and how much currency that has if you truly have an affinity, if you really feel more enlivened, perhaps even more yourself because of your practice of this form. So where does that value system fit with what I think Jose brought out in a very interesting way, which is that if you are working in a tradition, you need to deal with the community, that it is about the relationship with the community, which I have to say is not always pretty, as we all know. And so, yeah, don't even get us started. But let's not, yeah, okay. So I guess there's kind of a dialectic, a parallel conversation happening where if you have a love for an art form, and even maybe the culture that it comes from, for me, I'm just going to put my opinion out there, it seems like you as the artist are having a relationship with your love of that form, as opposed to a relationship with that form. And then maybe the deeper you stay with it, there's a transition that happens. But I think those gradations of transition are very subtle and very invisible. And who's to say that, the very first person on the planet who did, a certain tradition wasn't him or herself still involved in the love of it as opposed to the form or the community of it. So it's an interesting thing to say that you come from a tradition or you own a tradition, because in a way I think each one of us have a relationship with ourselves in partnership with that tradition, as opposed to being owned by that tradition on its own terms. Yeah.
I was just going to ask what a tradition is that no one loves. You know what I mean? Like, you're separating out the community from those who love it and relating to their love for it.
Mm-hmm.
But what is a tradition that no one loves?
What is a tradition that no one loves?
Yeah, like, it's a very tangential question to your point, and
Yeah.
your point is not invalidated by the question, but just the question of, like, you're right, like, we relate to our own relationship to the world in terms of what we love and what we don't love.
Mm-hmm.
But what does the world become when no one loves and acts, like, what the foundation is
Mm-hmm.
of it then, I guess.
Right. I'm just
Like,
gonna.
what isn't people relating to their love for it? When
Yeah,
are
that's a
people
big
not
question.
relating-
That's
when
a.
are people relating straight to the tradition and not to their love for it? Like, when is that like straight on, like, intravenous relationship happening of, like,
I don't know if it ever happens, actually. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hypothetical, but I think that if the question is asked, do you have a relationship to a tradition or a culture or a technique, or do you have a relationship to your journey within that? I guess I'm highlighting different aspects of the partnership. What else was I going to say? So, but when you talk about not loving something, in a way, I think that the journey of trying to be in relation with a tradition includes really hating its guts and hating your teachers and hating the way they treat you and saying, well, fuck this, I'm just going to go back to postmodern because I can't deal with all these rules. I think that is part of the journey.
And that's love too.
That is also love. It's like family, right? Yeah.
I don't love anybody that I don't
Love and
hate.
hate.
That's what I would say.
It's like it's tiny.
Does anyone else want to highlight an element of the conversation that you felt like was really exciting or juicy that happened in your table that didn't get aired? Yes.
I think in a way, in both the tables we were discussing a very pertinent issue that about teaching a particular tradition to someone who does not belong to the land where that cultural tradition came from. So a lot of us were discussing on how open are the teachers and how open are the people who want to learn this. So I think we kind of arrived at it that it works both ways. I think it also works, the individual who wants to learn also has to be open to accepting certain things in the tradition that does not belong to his or her own tradition. At the same time, the person who's teaching has to bring out the aspects of the cultural tradition in a way that can be suitable to the person who's learning. So that's what we arrived at. I mean, if anybody wants to comment on that.
Thank you. I think all the tables I think 3 tables, but I think all the tables, what we were discussing today, it's both historic and very, very important. The questions actually very well addressed. We got more questions, I think, than answers in all the tables, but actually that's the start point for everything. And I think my only suggestion would be like, let's go back to the concepts, because the concepts are the ones that are going to keep us, like, define yourself. What is tradition? What is authenticity? What is innovation? What is stylization? What is distortion? And all those concepts are going to make us, if we agree, like, okay, we cannot advance in the discussion if we do the